from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, more than 100,000 new COVID cases in the U.S. today, more than 600,000 around the world. This is the new daily reality, with so many still unvaccinated. For those who are, will we need boosters, and when? Moderna co-founder Noubar Afeyan joins us to talk about that, vaccines for kids, and fighting Delta. Plus, with companies pushing the return to work to 2022, how long will the migration out of cities and to, well, everywhere else continue? Redfin CEO Glenn Kelman is here to talk about the new abnormal in residential and commercial real estate. And Dropbox has gone virtual first, reconfiguring its office space into mini studios where workers can collaborate in person when necessary. CEO Drew Houston will join us to talk about their great experiment to reshape the future of work. But let's start with those job numbers. And it was a victory lap of sorts for President Biden as the U.S. labor market charged ahead in July with the biggest increase in employment in nearly a year. The Rosie Report highlighting a level of optimism in the economy despite concerns about COVID-19 continuing to surge. Take a listen.
What is indisputable now is this. The Biden plan is working. The Biden plan produces results, and the Biden plan is moving the country forward. We're now the first administration in history to add jobs every single month in our first 6 months in office.
How did the markets react to the numbers? Our Kriti Gupta has the roundup. Kriti, take it away.
Well, Emily, a risk-on day in the markets because of that jobs report, a jobs beat, the second one this year, of course, after a big upside surprise last month as well. And like I said, a risk-on day in the S&P 500, but without tech support. And that's really where you saw that here. The NASDAQ 100 underperforming, big tech underperforming even more. Why? It's all because of those havens. Essentially, with a risk-on report like this, a positive recovery report, you saw those cyclicals really do well, but those safety plays, your treasuries, your big tech, they didn't do so well. So you saw yields higher as well. And I want to show you what's been going on the year. So if you just hop inside my terminal, I really want to show you this kind of negative correlation you've seen between economic surprises and what happens in the stock market. Essentially this idea that because there's so much support from the Fed right now in terms of simply supporting the market, whether it's bond purchases, whether it's low interest rates, it does end up meaning that any negative economic surprises have actually been good for the market. That's really what this chart shows, that negative correlation you see right on the right hand of the chart. And really, this report today kind of flipped that on its head. I also want to show you what didn't do so well today, because like I said, a risk-on day in the markets, not so great for tech though. Semis down, NASDAQ biotech down, even those Chinese ADRs, Emily, all of them in the red today.
All right, Kriti, thanks so much for that roundup. A lot of red there. Meantime, as cases of the Delta variant continue to rise, so too concerns about the efficacy of vaccines. Moderna has announced its vaccine offers protection for 6 months at a 93% efficacy, though this trial was completed before the Delta variant showed up. Joining me now to discuss vaccines, the race to inoculate the world, Moderna co-founder and flagship pioneering founder and CEO Noubar Afeyan. Noubar, always good to have you here. That efficacy data from you yesterday was really promising. But we're still all wondering, are we going to need a booster or not? And the CDC hasn't given clarity on this, though vaccine makers seem pretty insistent. What's your stance on if we will need boosters and when?
It's great to be back. In fact, yesterday was an important day for Moderna in that we were able to report some of the most recent data that we've obtained. From the beginning, we set out to develop the most effective vaccine against this virus that would last for the longest possible time, help the largest number of people, and be safe. And of course, we had shown a number of those things, but not the piece about how long it may last. And this was the first time we had data that at least showed that 6 months after the initial vaccinations, we're seeing essentially the same level of protection, which is very encouraging. As you said, the Delta strain, as well as a number of other strains that are emerging, pose a set of new threats, and we're also testing against those. So far, what we've seen is that the level of antibodies that we see in our vaccinated patients is adequate to be able to protect against those. But we do think that the rate at which this variant is spreading should require that we think carefully about particularly vulnerable people, older populations, certain health-affected individuals whose immune systems may be weak, that at a minimum we should get ready to be able to offer a third booster shot to those and perhaps a larger number. And that's what we're waiting for the CDC and other health organizations to determine.
And when it comes to the chemistry of that booster, should that be offered, I assume that'll take into account Delta and some of these other variants. Will it be different than the other shots already available, the vaccine that you have already available on the market because of how the virus has changed?
We are, as a technology developer, creating alternative solutions so that we can let the data indicate what's the best trade-off. Right now, we've shown data that our original vaccine adds so much more antibodies upon a third boost that it is highly protective also against the Delta and other strains. On the other hand, we're also developing variant vaccines in case we need to switch to a more potent, more directed vaccine against those variants. So we're doing the groundwork needed to have choice, and then we're going to work with the governments to be able to make sure we know what's the best solution at a given time. What we can't do in this fight is to basically trail the virus. We need to be ahead of the virus. And to do that, we need to come up with multiple solutions so whatever the virus does, we're able to respond.
So some people are getting boosters anyway, even though they're not recommended. They're just going in and getting a third shot. My mom, for example, she's over 65. She got Moderna 6 months ago. She loves seeing your interviews here on the show. Would it be prudent for someone like that to go in and get a third shot now, or should they wait?
I think that the public health is something where if everybody takes these things into their own hands and doesn't follow guidance, I think it could become quite problematic, both from a supply standpoint and also tracking the potential downstream consequences. So I cannot recommend that people do that. I do think that following guidance and hopefully the authorities will be quite responsive to what they're seeing out there is the best course. I'm also aware that there's a number of folks, in fact, there's a number of folks who are immune suppressed, who, for example, are getting cancer treatments that I've heard anecdotally are actually getting third doses. And the other thing that's happening, Emily, more and more, and I suspect this is going to increase, is that people are actually getting antibody levels measured, and they're beginning to at least think about how much protection they have. Of course, we're seeing in lots of different discussions about what is it that's protecting us. Is it antibodies? Is it T cells? There's a very recent report out, I think just yesterday, today, that showed that in fact antibodies are the predominant protector against infection, even while T cells and other things are very helpful in fighting back an infection once it happens. So we need to keep the antibody levels high, and we need to be able to track them.
Now, when it comes to kids, my kids 8 and under, they're getting ready to go back to school. Vaccines aren't ready. Where is Moderna in terms of progress on a vaccine for 12 and under? And when that comes out, do you imagine it'll be offered from 12 all the way down to, infants? Or will there be, 12 to 5, for example, a smaller age range, and then younger children come even later?
We're doing the studies from 12 down to 6 months. And as the data becomes available, and we've said this, we hope this will be toward the middle of the fall. So we're working as fast as we possibly can. The only thing we can't accelerate is time itself. We cannot do studies that take 2 months and less than that time. And so some of these things are going to be taking the time it takes. But we're very actively getting our tests done. We're working with the regulatory authorities and the government public health folks so that we're in locksteps. And as soon as we can get the data, we will have it. Now, what gets authorized in what order is something else that we're going to have to work very closely to do. I can tell you one thing, Emily, nothing that's happened in the last 12 months, especially in regulating and approving and authorizing vaccines, would have ever happened without an unprecedented collaboration between the developers and the government and authorities. And that collaboration is continuing and needs to continue until we're completely on the other side of this pandemic. That's the key to success here.
Right. You've talked about how vital that partnership really has been. Now, Flagship recently published a white paper on the big lessons from the pandemic. What are 1 to 2 things we can do to preempt the next one?
I think there's things we could do at the individual level. I also think there's things we could do at a societal level. At the societal level, I really think we need to reconsider our relationship with healthcare, because it seems to us that much of what we call healthcare is actually disease care, and that we wait too long to be able to deal with the actual mechanisms underlying our sicknesses. And we now know so much more than even 5, 10 years ago about what leads to disease, whether it's infectious disease or any number of the other chronic pandemics that we don't call pandemic, but in fact they're every bit as pandemic because they afflict everybody in the world. And what we need to do, I think, out of this traumatic period is to realize that we have to get upstream of disease. We need to think about what are the conditions that allow this to happen, and what can we do to be preemptive, to delay, to deter, to defer disease. All of these things have approaches. Now it's going to take a big societal change to think about how do you regulate those, what are those products. This is not about healthy living. There's a space between healthy living and being sick that we think is going to get developed over the next years. And that's one thing. Individually, I think we need to make sure we avail ourselves to the highest level of protection that we can. Where I'm obviously very saddened and concerned to see just how high a vaccination level we have in some places in the world and how low we have in other places in the world. And we need to make sure at an individual level, people act responsibly, not only for their own health, but the health of the people around them that they can seriously infect.
Absolutely. Nubar, always good to have you here on the show. So many people have so many questions, and I really appreciate you doing your best to answer them and all the work you're doing to speed this up and get these vaccines out there. Nubar Afeyan, Moderna co-founder and chair, as well as the CEO and founder of Flagship Pioneering. Okay, coming up, Apple defends its newest safety feature following calls from privacy advocates. We're going to find out what they are next with our own Mark Gurman. This is Bloomberg. Apple has hit back at privacy concerns over new child safety software due for release later this year. The iPhone maker revealed the new features for iCloud, Messages, and Siri to combat the spread of sexually explicit images of children. But some privacy advocates say the measure could create a backdoor. For more on this, we're joined by Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. So Mark, first of all, tell us about what Apple has actually announced here and how this software will actually work.
So 3 distinct features. We'll start with the easiest one. One is in Siri and search. If you look up terms related to child abuse or look up explicit images of children, it will throw up a message warning you against that. The second one, this is for children 13 and under who are connected to their parents' iCloud accounts as part of family sharing. This will be opt-in. So if someone 13 years or younger either tries to send or receive a nude or explicit photo, the machine learning on the device will determine that this is a nude photo, and the child will be given a warning against sending it or receiving it. And if they do decide to send it or receive the image or view the image, their parent will receive a notification. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. The most complicated one, the one generating headlines over the last 2 days, is a new feature for iCloud Photos, where Apple is essentially reviewing your iCloud photo library using a technology called cryptography. They don't actually see the image itself. Every image is assigned what is known as a hash key. And they're comparing those images to a known database of child pornography and other abusive images involving children from law enforcement agencies. And what Apple is going to do there is, if they determine a user's iCloud account has a certain unexplained number of photos in their library, then Apple will be notified. They'll have human reviewers sort of approve or authenticate that that's the case, and then they can report you to law enforcement.
So, not surprisingly, privacy advocates, some of them not happy about this, especially given Apple is a company that, has talked, very extensively about how much they do care about privacy. What are people complaining about?
I hope or think most people, would agree that Apple's mission here in terms of what they're, talking about here in combating, child pornography and those types of images, that is a good thing. So people aren't, angry about that. People are concerned that this would create a slippery slope, so to speak, whereas this same technology can be used by governments to monitor dissidents and citizens and such, can be used for more nefarious purposes. And so what Apple told us today on a briefing with a bunch of reporters is that, this technology is very specific to this child abuse system. They're not really giving this technology to governments. And for now, it's only in the US, where it's probably less likely than in China or elsewhere that this technology could be misused.
Okay. All right, interesting. We'll continue to follow how that one develops. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, thanks so much. Meantime, as we continue to await a verdict in the Apple versus Epic court case, details are emerging about another case involving the video game maker. It's been revealed in previously redacted documents that Google actually considered acquiring the developer of the hit game Fortnite. Epic is suing Google over the fees it charges developers in its mobile app store. According to an excerpt of Epic's antitrust complaint, Google contemplated buying some or all of Epic as the companies clashed over distribution plans. The document doesn't reveal, however, if Google ever reached out to Epic to move forward with such a deal. Interesting. All right, coming up, Tokyo records its biggest jump in COVID cases as the city winds down as host of the Olympic Games. We'll have a report from the Japanese capital next. Plus, Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba is gearing up for the next Olympics. We'll find out how the tech titan will help bring the excitement of the games to your screens. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
It's the final days of the Tokyo Olympics. COVID-19 still a concern on the ground, with the capital hitting new record daily cases. That's 10x the prior week. Within the Olympic Village and games-related personnel, though, we haven't seen a new Olympic strain as far as we know, or seen any major outbreaks, and the infection rate within the Olympics has been lower than in Tokyo. Still, the concerns surrounding the virus linger with the contagious Delta variant. So what will all of this mean for Prime Minister Suga in the upcoming elections? Well, polls from late July showed his approval ratings drop, falling to 34% in a Nikkei survey. That's the lowest since taking office last September. So despite the Olympics bringing plenty of excitement on the ground and Japan's record gold medal wins, Suga's ratings likely depend more on the COVID-19 trends, and Japan continues to see a surge in cases. Kurumi Mori, Bloomberg News, Tokyo.
Well, as one Olympic Games ends, another is getting ready to begin. The 2022 Winter Olympics will be held in Beijing in just 6 months' time. Can you believe it? China's biggest e-commerce company, Alibaba, is helping the International Olympics Committee transform the Games for the digital era, just as it's done with retail across the country. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel spoke exclusively with Alibaba's Chris Tung in this week's Retail Transformed.
Alibaba is the cloud services and e-commerce worldwide partner of the Olympic Games. Our partnership started in 2017 as a 12-year commitment, and we have been working on many initiatives to drive digital transformation of the Games, starting from Tokyo 2020. And indeed, the Tokyo 2020 is an extraordinary Olympic Games. Not with the special setup with the audience on site and everything, but it's also one of the most innovative games with many new technologies being applied for the first time. One of the most significant examples is that Olympic Broadcasting Services, OBS, is hosted in the cloud for the very first time. To many broadcasters, this is perhaps the biggest technological change for more than half a century since the introduction of satellite transmission during the last also Tokyo Games in 1964. I think as a global technology company, we hope to help create a more connected, engaging, safe, and efficient Olympic game experience. That's why we see, this is a very special games for us.
How are these cloud services that Alibaba provides through OBS Cloud, how are they going to be propelled even further in the Zhangjiakou, the Beijing Games in 2022, just a few months from now?
Yeah, I think Tokyo 2020 marks the very beginning of our digital transformation journey for the Olympic Games. A lot of innovations that will be powered by Alibaba Cloud will take place along the way. We do have a clear roadmap for the upcoming games, Beijing included for sure. So you'll see not only We're gonna keep advancing our support for all the broadcasters with all OBS Cloud, but you're gonna see we're gonna apply quite a lot of AI and cloud technologies to make the game more efficient and smarter and all that.
What's the revenue boost, though? I mean, of course, on Singles Day, you have gross merchandise value. You have a number that you can peg to. What is the tangible impact on revenue for you because of your sponsorship, which I'm sure costs a lot of money? I know you have not revealed how much your 10-year partnership you spent on that, but again, what are you getting back from it in dollar terms?
Like I said, credibility is priceless. You know, after we released the news that this Tokyo game is supported by OBS Cloud, powered by Alibaba Cloud, we got so many requests from our clients from all over the world asking about how that works and what their business can be benefited from Alibaba Cloud technology. I don't think there's a very good way to quantify the benefits we're getting, but this is really the growth of brand power by associating with the largest event in the world in a very positive way.
You talked about the credibility that you gain from sponsoring these games. How do you go ahead and market the company at a time when you're also under pressure at home because of regulators? You guys have been kind of low profile for 10 months. Now you all of a sudden have to be high profile. How do you do that?
I don't think we raise or lower our profile for anything. We keep doing what we have to do. And, you know, as you probably know, our mission is really to make it easy to do business anywhere, you know, with our technology for all the brands that we're working with. So, of course, it's important to comply with all the regulations that for all the markets we're in. So this is something we will make sure we keep doing. And the most important thing is still driving the growth. And because the economy is relying on a lot of the technology more and more nowadays, and we are being the leader in the industry, we want to make sure that we're using the latest technology to provide the best insight to drive growth for our partners on our platform. That's the most important thing.
Alibaba's Chris Tung there with our own Stephen Engel. All right, coming up, as tech companies continue to delay the return to office for employees, we're going to find out how the massive population redistribution we've seen amidst the pandemic is impacting the housing market with Redfin's Glenn Kelman. And take a look at Expedia, shares slumping after the online travel agency warned of more uncertainty surrounding the COVID-19 variants. We'll have more on this week's tech's earnings and market reaction next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. It was another week full of tech results. I want to get a wrap of all of them with our own Kriti Gupta. Kriti, where do we see some standouts here?
Absolutely, Emily. Well, let's just start off with big tech because it didn't actually do so well in today's session. But I want to zoom out the chart because you really are seeing in the past year or so, take a look at this. It's really rallied, and then you've seen this little kind of a trading range, trading sideways, no major breakouts. But in the last couple of weeks, you started to see an even tighter range, and that's really that line that you're seeing on the right hand of the chart. What I really want to point out here is that anything can happen with big tech, which is why it's worth focusing on the micro. Let's get to some of those earnings stories. You mentioned Expedia in your intro, really taking a beating here. They actually beat their earnings, and yet shares are down 8%. All of it has to do with that uncertainty around the Delta variant, what it means for that travel recovery that they've actually really benefited from alongside airlines and other booking companies as well. I also want to highlight FireEye, down a whopping 17% after they missed their earnings. They underwhelmed, according to one analyst at Morgan Stanley. This is not the era you really want to miss your earnings when you have about an over 80% beat rate across all sectors. So no good news there. I do want to highlight Yelp, though, because that is one of the sole stories today, sole tech stories today that was actually in the green. Shares up 5%, but they those analysts did question the durability of that growth. And lastly, AMC Entertainment, that meme stock, actually down on the day after FT reported another hedge fund has a short bet. And speaking of meme stocks, I want to end very quickly with that Robinhood story. You did see a complete change, down 28% yesterday on reports that insiders were going to sell, up 19% today, Emily, that those selling orders are going to have to be put on hold according to the SEC. So a volatile week for Robinhood. I guess that makes it a meme stock, Emily.
Indeed it does. The roller coaster continues. Thanks so much, Creedy. Meantime, a day after announcing a further delay in the return to office of their corporate workers, now slated to come back in January, Amazon is now ordering all frontline employees to mask up, regardless of vaccination status. This is yet another example of how companies are having to constantly reevaluate their policies in response to the spread of COVID-19 and the Delta variant. Let's take a listen to how some other companies are reacting.
As far as the Delta goes, it's difficult to tell what the effect is, except for markets that have closed down.
Trying to get people to, to encourage them to come back. The Delta variant has changed all that. The new CDC guidelines has changed all that.
We're reinstituting the mandatory mask policy at all of our sites.
We are strongly encouraging. We're providing incentives. We're having good conversations with employees about the benefits. And then implementing the safety guidelines I talked about with masking and social distancing as well.
We are going to work with governments based on government mandates, local mandates. We're going to follow them.
One business directly impacted by companies extending the period of work from home is, of course, real estate. Who better to get a read on that? Redfin CEO Glenn Kelman. Glenn, it's been a roller coaster year for you and anyone trying to move, especially at this time. What are the trends you're seeing right now? Obviously, there was this push to return to work. A lot of companies have put that on pause. Companies are reevaluating, what they want to be doing years from now. How are you seeing this play out in the market?
Well, people definitely took a break from home buying following Memorial Day. So the market was absolutely insane going into May, and then it just went down to some hot level in June. Now it's getting hot again in July. So I think that traffic peaked maybe in March, home buying demand peaked in May, but still there's just a lot more people who want to buy a house than there is houses to buy.
So what does that say about the fundamental redistribution in population? I mean, is that slowing down? How does the country look different after this is all said and done?
Well, I think a lot of rich people are leaving California, New York, and moving to the center of the country. It's absolutely a good thing for America. Historians are going to look back at what happened over the past 20 or 30 years and just wonder how there could have been such a buildup in a few major cities of all this technology and all this wealth. So the idea that you can build technology and live in Ohio or Idaho or Tulsa, Oklahoma, that is going to be good for this country because it's just going to more equitably distribute all this money. So I think it's mostly a good thing. It's just going to be hard for those little towns to adapt to it. If you're moving to Nashville, you're going to be paying almost twice as much for a home as the people who are living there already. And still it'll seem cheap to you because you're using monopoly money from California or New York or somewhere like that.
And what about commercial real estate? I mean, so many of these companies are either they're going virtual first, they haven't yet decided, they're in the middle of this great experiment. You walk into the middle of downtown San Francisco and there's no buzz, there's no sort of magic in the air that was there. Is that going to return?
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to commercial real estate because even if you convert it to residential real estate, the reason that people wanted to live downtown was to be close to work. And if they're not going to be going into the office that much, the appeal is gone. So it's going to take a little while for all the air to come out of the balloon because you sign 5 or 10-year leases, but the air is coming out of the balloon. And commercial real estate just doesn't have a bottom as far as I can tell because so many people are working from home and they're going to continue to do so. Every office that has tried to get people to come back has had to back off. And it's not just because of Delta, it's because the employees don't want to come back. And if you insist on it, they're just going to go work somewhere else. So I think people are going to want to get together maybe once or twice a week, but ultimately that's going to mean that offices are going to be reused by one group of people coming in on Monday and Tuesday and another group coming in on Wednesday and Thursday.
Meantime, climate change, there are wildfires threatening, very popular destinations. And I'm curious how this is playing out there. I mean, I know people who, smoke in Tahoe, obviously Utah. There's been a lot of dangerous wildfires happening there. What's going on?
Well, it seems like you can't deter people from moving to places that are threatened by climate risk. So Phoenix and Las Vegas are two of the hottest real estate markets, and they're also just literally the hottest places in America, most susceptible to drought. So we have not been able to dissuade people from moving into flood zones in Texas, moving into flood zones in Florida. Those are two of the highest growth areas. It seems like the future is arriving very quickly, but still Americans are more interested in looking for lower taxes and lower housing costs. So it's been a real contradiction in terms, and I've been surprised by it.
Now, we're still seeing some epic bidding wars for homes out there, and I wonder if you think we're in a bubble. Are we in a housing bubble? Is that bubble on course to burst? And after this, could we see a bust like we saw before and through the financial crisis?
Maybe. I mean, I think the issue is that housing prices aren't going to increase at a rate of 26%. That was the rate in May. And then in June, it came down to about 25%. That's still unsustainable, but it's not like 2008 where you had strawberry pickers buying houses in the Central Valley, where subprime lending was subsidizing a market where people couldn't even make their first mortgage payment. The people who are buying houses right now are mostly rich people. It is second properties, it is luxury homes that are up the most. And so really what's driving this boom is just this whole K-shaped recovery. The rich keep getting richer and they're using some of that money to buy bigger houses. And given that the people who are moving are actually spending less on a house, they might be moving from LA to Idaho. And when they do that, they're getting an $800,000 house that seems expensive by Idaho standards, but is still $400,000 less than what they had in LA. So I think there's a bunch of factors that make the housing market somewhat sustainable, but it is still exquisitely sensitive to interest rates. And we are running along a knife's edge on that because there's a lot of government spending and there's a lot of inflation risk that's building up because of the labor shortage. So I don't know. I hope we keep running along the knife's edge and then everything's going to be okay, but no promises.
Glenn, always appreciate you giving it to us straight. Redfin CEO Glenn Kelman, thanks so much for joining us. Great to have you back here on the show. Okay, coming up. Although people may not be heading back to the office just yet, they are venturing outside and giving up their pandemic pastimes, including video games. Zynga, feeling the heat. We're going to speak to CEO Frank Gibeau coming up. This is Bloomberg. For Dropbox, the future of work is distributed, and investors seem to agree. The cloud storage company reporting a standout second quarter with strong earnings, raising its revenue guidance as well. I spoke with Dropbox CEO Drew Houston to talk about the quarter and how their virtual-first strategy is taking shape.
Our business has been pretty stable, and if anything, certainly businesses like, there's Dropbox, where people were using Dropbox before the pandemic and during the pandemic and need it afterwards. So our business has been really stable. And then a lot of our newer products like HelloSign and DocSend have benefited massively from the shift to hybrid work because these are new habits that we have as we've had to shift to working from home. And then in the long run, this shift to hybrid work means we need this whole new working model means we need new tools. And so when lockdown happened, we completely reoriented our product roadmap to think about how do we make this a great experience.
You've also shaken up your own working plans. You've gone to a virtual first model, which you say is better than a hybrid model. Explain that to me. What's the difference and what do you see as the advantages?
Sure. So we've adopted a virtual first model. And for us, that means individual work happens from home. And then we've turned our offices into collaborative convening spaces because I think it's really important that you still have the in-person experience because there's no substitute for that. It's very hard to build relationships over Zoom. And the reason we chose this model, this is a little bit different from the come back for 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And I think companies will find that this is challenging because if you just sort of say, hey, everybody come in, whatever, 2 days a week, then you lose out of the community of being in an office. And then if you're like, all right, well, everybody come in on the same 2 days a week, then you're not getting really efficient utilization of your space. People don't have flexibility. So I think with a lot of these hybrid models, you want to avoid kind of a worst of both worlds situations where, you're either commuting to be on Zoom with the people at home, or people don't have the kinds of flexibility they need. So we've really thought through how do we try to get the best of both worlds.
So you do plan to reopen at some point. This virtual first model is something that you're just doing in the meantime?
Yeah, it's very important. The virtual first does not mean remote only. I mean, we've all been working only from home over the last 18 months for the most part. So the in-person experience is really important. Of course, with Delta variants, like we're still figuring out timeline for reopening safely, but we're all looking forward to that.
You have beautiful office space in San Francisco the last time I saw it, which was a while ago now. But what do you think this all means for the San Francisco real estate market, where many tech companies have these beautiful spaces, but some of them might not need them?
Yeah, well, I mean, San Francisco's a great city. It's been a great place to build our company. I think as employees spread out, and then opportunity will spread out. And I think San Francisco Bay Area will still be a great place to work, great place to build companies. But I also think it's a good thing for many reasons. If with these virtual first type models or hybrid work, if good jobs can be opened up beyond the Bay Area or these tech hubs, I think that opens up a lot of opportunity for the rest of the country and world. It's great for companies. They can unlock new talent pools. And I think spreading the opportunity around is really great for a lot of the issues like inequality and other things we've seen that have been really, really challenging in these tech hubs.
Now, the other big theme of the last year in technology has been the antitrust scrutiny on big tech. And I know you have some thoughts on this. And I'm just curious, does Microsoft's control of Office, does Apple's control of the App Store, does that impact Dropbox in a way that you believe is unfair?
Well, I mean, we've always operated in a competitive environment and do well despite competition, and we think that's just part of being in the big leagues. So, and then more broadly in technology, there's always new problems to solve for customers. That said, of course, we've always been proponents of a level playing field, so that for the companies that own platforms that you can compete fairly. I think this is a really important conversation to have.
Meantime, activist investor Elliott has taken a stake in Dropbox, and I'm curious what the nature of that relationship has been so far, and what exactly do they want? What changes do they want to see?
We have active dialogue with all of our large shareholders. These conversations have been friendly. There's no sense of no indication from my perspective of any misalignments. As far as how they're thinking about the investment, what if any changes they'd like to see, I'd probably have to refer to them for what they think or for their comment. But it's been a constructive and friendly conversation.
Meantime, Dropbox seems to be the constant subject of takeover speculation, and we've seen so much M&A in the enterprise business. How do you feel about that? How would you feel about combining with another company and adding what Dropbox is world-class at to something that another company does well?
Yeah, I mean, we think we're building a really valuable company, and we think we have, and we're on the right track. I mean, we're very excited about our path as an independent company. I think we've been making a lot of progress. Last quarter is a great example of that. In the long run, we're focused on building the most long-term value possible. There are multiple ways to do that, but for now, we think we're on the right path, and this shift to hybrid work is a major tailwind for us.
You also joined Facebook's board last year, which was quite an eventful year. How would you like to see Facebook use the massive power that it has?
Well, I know the team at Facebook is really focused. I mean, there are many, Facebook's at the center of many issues that affect all of us. I know Mark and Cheryl and the team really care a lot about making sure Facebook is a force for good. Being on the board, I can't get into too many more specifics. But it's been a great experience being on the board.
So as you think about, you're a CEO, your job is to plan, to try to envision the future. Like when you think about where the world is next year, is there any playbook? I mean, is there no plan? How do you even begin to start planning for the future when we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring?
Yeah, this is the world we live in these days. And so, when operating under uncertainty, I think first trying to paint the best picture you can of the future, knowing that it will be imperfect, but also knowing that you have to adapt. And I think agility is more important than throwing a bullseye the first time. So in our case, we were thinking about, all right, well, how do we, there's this, there have been a lot of challenges with working from home. Nobody knows exactly how all this is going to unfold. At the same time, there are a lot of advantages, right, to distributed work or in terms of flexibility and all the other things. So when you're operating under this kind of uncertainty, do the best you can to a plan, but then also leave room to iterate.
Dropbox CEO Drew Houston there. Meantime, Google co-founder Larry Page has obtained residency in New Zealand, according to local media. He and his family had been reportedly living in Fiji during the pandemic, but then flew to New Zealand to seek medical treatment for his child. Page was granted residency under a category that requires people to invest $7 million in the country over a 3-year period. The Bloomberg Billionaires Index shows he's worth $122 billion. Much more ahead. This is Bloomberg. Big declines for shares of the mobile game maker Zynga after the company reported forecasts that missed Wall Street estimates, a sign that gamers might be opting to play outside instead of inside virtual worlds. The company also announced they're delaying 2 hotly anticipated games, Farmville 3 and Star Wars Hunters. Joining me now for a deeper look at the results, Zynga CEO Frank Chabot. Frank, always good to have you here. So shares down more than 18% at the close. What do you make of the reaction from investors today?
I think it's a reflection of trying to understand what the great reopening means for interactive entertainment. Our company reported very strong results for Q2. We were up 57% in revenues. Our advertising was up 111%. Words with Friends saw its best year in 12 years. But at the same time, what we started to see in June and July is the great reopening. People started to play a little less in terms of the games that we had. And as we also looked at that time period, we saw that the IDFA privacy changes from Apple started to have a little bit of an effect on the mobile ecosystem. So we took the opportunity to look at the second half, and we guided about 3% down on the top line, but we held our profitability. And even if that unfolds in the way that we describe it, we're still going to have a record year. It'll be the best year Zynga's ever had. And it'll be strong growth year over year over a pretty big year last year with COVID. So it is an interesting time for the industry, obviously, and trying to understand how these trends will all unfold. But we feel very good about our business fundamentals and how the business is set up for growth in 22 and beyond.
Now, the delay of Farmville from Q3 to Q4, what's going to change in the next few months that makes that possible?
Yeah, the game is ready. We're very pleased with the quality and all the underlying dynamics related to engagement and retention. The thing that we want to see happen is just as the summer unfolds and you start to see more back to school and a return to work and then the fall take off, we'd like to see that demand settle down a little bit and also let a couple of months of further development of the advertising channels in the post IDFA world. With a game as good as Farmville and with as big a brand, we really want the market conditions to be just right. So we're really waiting for the optimal market window, and we think that's going to be more in Q4 than Q3.
Why do you think these changes that Apple has made are going to be short-term only? I mean, isn't this something that you could be feeling the effects of for a while?
Well, I think people are adapting to it by creating new innovative ad products. Basically, the change in privacy has removed data from the decision making on whether a dollar of advertising makes sense or not from an investment standpoint. And there are ways to understand how good that investment is by developing some other techniques to figure out where that player is coming from and what their behaviors will ultimately be like. There's also new ad products starting to emerge from some of the networks out there. Unity has done a very good job in adjusting to IDFA, as well as Apple itself. Its search programs on the App Store are providing very good returns.
Right.
And of course, as iOS has started to shift the way that it handles advertising, a lot of the dollars have moved over to Android. Android advertising and the user base there is performing very well. So, it's a very dynamic
Okay.
and complex ecosystem. But in general, we think that it's unfolding in the right way now that we start to head into August and we're starting to see positive yields again inside the UA channels.
As dynamic as the moving workforce, you're getting rid of some of your office space in San Francisco. Do you think, quickly, I've got 30 seconds left, do you think that means, more of your workforce is going to be remote only?
Absolutely. So what we've learned over the last 14 months is that, we have a new connected workplace model that allows folks to better balance the time that they want to spend at home or in remote work, as well as going into the office for, kickoffs and cultural events, as well as times when you need to get together as a team. So we're trying to build a more flexible work model that is tailored to the way people want to work going forward in the future. Is a very collaborative process with our game teams. It does not mean that we're leaving San Francisco. We'll continue to have a presence there, but we're optimizing our location strategy, be more in tune with connected workplace.
Frank Chabot, Zynga CEO, always good to have you here on the show. Appreciate you stopping by. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Stay with us. Wall Street Week is coming up next. That's all from San Francisco. I'm Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg.